Welcome back to week 13, part 3. Before I left you, we were discussing the DeWitts and DeWitts article and the student Mark, who had great accuracy, pretty fast rate at 132 words correct per minute, but just couldn't seem to answer those comprehension questions for 6th grade, for 4th grade, when silent reading. So I was going over the different comprehension, quote unquote, miscues that might be going on with Mark. It could be a relational inference issue, causal inference. Maybe he's getting tripped up on understanding the syntax at the sentence level of the passage. Excessive elaboration is huge from what I've seen lately with students where they're creating their own knowledge, they're inventing knowledge or overusing prior knowledge. Maybe there's a word or term they don't know, or just no response in general. So when you're analyzing your student results, you want to take a look at the question type and see what that question is requiring of the student. Maybe you can determine that the comprehension issue is a result of difficulty with one of these areas. So going back to Mark, he only answered 6 out of 25 of the inference questions correctly. He often will pick up information from one part of the text but won't integrate it with other parts, so that's that relational inference piece. He has a difficult time inferring the antecedent of the action or determining the consequence, so that's a causal inference issue. His most common response was to insert or invent knowledge not in the passage, so like I was saying, the excessive elaboration. And there were a few cases, not too many, but where Mark didn't know the meaning of a word. And I think the example that they used for that was the word oppose. The word oppose was in the question, and Mark wasn't sure what it meant and had to ask. He also had some difficulty with reasoning skills. So in the article, there is figure 6, which is on page 430. I think this is a phenomenal way to analyze and organize your data for assessment artifact and reflection 3, possibly even taking the questions from your QRI the week prior and taking a look at what type of questions, what type of inference the student may have to make, because even though they all say implicit, even though it's an implicit question, there are different types of implicit questions. There are different types of inferences they're having to make. So this is my plug for figure 6 as a great tool for analyzing comprehension questions. You could even use it for the case study this week to analyze those questions, see if anything interesting or noteworthy turns up. So interventions for Mark, what should we do? We could teach him question and answer relationships. And there's Raphael is one of the authors of that for question answer relationships now. He would have to label the question type, identify the thinking that is required, and even create some of his own questions similar to that type. Direct explanation and modeling of the inference process. To help students understand what an inference is, you can use a weaving analogy or close to teach the basic idea of inferring what comes next. Also teaching Mark how to code the text as he reads to get him used to thinking and processing and all of the different processes that occur when you're reading. All right, let's talk more broadly about comprehension. What is it? Well, Durkin defines it as the essence of reading, which it really is. Wilson and Gambrill define it as a process of using one's own experiences and text clues to infer the author's intended meaning. So it's both prior knowledge with text to infer what the author meant for you to get from it. Interactive No, the text can't talk back. Interactive meaning that there are many processes occurring at once. You're anticipating meaning, you're recognizing words, looking at vocab, all of those different things. So I actually was looking in one of my favorite tools, the Teaching Reading Sourcebook by the Core Literacy Library, taking a look at comprehension, and they had this great visual graphic to help us get a better sense of what comprehension is. And with this, comprehension consists of three key elements. We have the reader, the text, the activity, and they're all set within a context. So over here with the reader, thinking about each reader brings a unique set of competencies that affect comprehension. These competencies vary from reader to reader, but also within the individual, depending on the text. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. So the competencies within the reader vary from reader to reader, but also within the reader depending on the text and the activity. So the reader might be more skilled with one type of text or doing a certain type of activity. So reader competencies include speed and accuracy, fluency, vocabulary size, general word knowledge, all of those things. Thinking about the text is any form of connected written language. It can vary on many different dimensions by genre, by structure, that kind of thing. For comprehension instruction, text must be conceptually challenging but not too difficult to decode or comprehend. Now the activity over here. The reading activity includes three key components in itself. It involves the purpose for reading, the process for reading, and then the consequences of doing the reading. So the purpose, why are we doing this? The process, where the reader actually applies a range of processes from decoding to higher level thinking. And then the consequences, both long-term and short-term. And then these three pieces, the text, the reader, and the activity, are all embedded within the context or the larger social and cultural context in which reading occurs, which shapes the interrelated elements. For children learning to read, the classroom oftentimes provides a primary context. And then the instructional decisions that a teacher makes, from groupings to presentation, can really significantly impact this reading experience. So I liked this visual representation of what comprehension is. There are many different comprehension strategies, which are conscious plans that readers apply and adapt to make sense of text and get the most out of what they read. So monitoring comprehension, connecting to world knowledge, predicting, recognizing text structure, asking questions, answering questions, constructing mental images, and summarizing. And I'm going to talk about each of these in turn, but these are some of the more prevalent comprehension strategies that we want to provide instruction on. But first, a word about metacognition and what it is. So metacognition is the knowledge and control we have of our own thought processes. And the reason this is important is because in order to be effective at using strategies, you have to have metacognition. You have to be able to have the knowledge of your thought processes, and be able to control them as well. So why? It drives the students' use of effective strategies. Now within metacognition, we have metacognitive knowledge. So that's the awareness of your thinking and learning. And then we have metacognitive control. And that's the ability to self-regulate and maintain focus on a certain topic, the ability to control the use of a fix-up strategy when your mind starts to wander or linger. So that is metacognition, knowledge, and control. Now, monitoring comprehension goes with metacognition. It is also called clarifying, and it's being aware whether or not you are understanding the text and dealing with the problems as they arise. A challenge for struggling adolescent readers, since they don't understand what they read, and they also don't know that they don't understand it. So monitoring, clarifying is a really big challenge for them, since a lot of times students think just because they can read it, they're reading it, but actually they need to be monitoring their comprehension. So students believe that if they can decode, then they're understanding the text. But that's not always the case. Monitoring comprehension is fundamental to reading comprehension, and for that reason you may want to develop an assessment on monitoring, just having them stop and you covering up what they're reading and asking them those questions about what are they reading, what are they thinking about, what's happening, does it make sense what they're reading, those sorts of questions. And actually, I talked last week about this article in the most recent Reading Teacher, Reading What Else Matters Besides Strategies and Skills, where the authors talk about, yes, strategies and skills are important, but so is metacognition. And you might remember I talked about the teacher who gave her students a checklist for metacognition. And so this was a table from that article where it has teacher questions to model metacognition. Why are you reading? Does this make sense? Is there a problem? What is the problem? Can you fix it? Can you get back on track? And then here is the checklist for students to use, you know, if they feel something's going wrong. And then here's the target behavior that would follow. So I thought that tied in nicely with this week. This is helpful because up here we have now reading is impeded. Reading is impeded when one of two things happen. A word is not recognized or there's a meaning issue. The student's not understanding the meaning of what they're reading. So now if the word is not recognized, you want to use a word recognition strategy, decoding, phonics, chunking, structural analysis, anything to that effect. If there's a meaning issue, maybe it's a meaning issue at the word level, and we need to employ a word learning strategy like dictionary use, morphemic analysis, contextual analysis. Maybe it's a comprehension strategy they need to use, so one of these things. Or maybe it's a fix-up strategy because they're not attending to the text they're reading, so maybe they need to reread, look back, use context clues, ask someone, or check a reference. So this is something important to keep in mind as you're reading with your student, thinking about, okay, are they having word recognition issues, or is it some sort of larger meaning issue derived from, vocabulary needs or comprehension needs or monitoring needs and metacognition needs. Definitely a helpful item there. All right, the next strategy I want to talk about is connecting to world knowledge, aka activating prior knowledge, or using background knowledge, which was initially thought to be what comprehension was, going back to that Presley article. It is linking knowledge from a previous experience to ideas in the text. When readers know the topic of the text beforehand, it does have a huge impact on their success with the text. That was found by Pearson. Background knowledge is related to schema theory, and readers really need to learn to tap into that relevant, keyword relevant world knowledge, because a lot of times they want to tell you about, I have a friend named Joe, but is that really relevant world knowledge that's going to help with this specific text? All right, let's stop there, and when we come back, I will talk about predicting amongst a few other strategies, and then wrap up with a few more ideas for assessment.